Welcome back to Design by Taj. Just before I reveal what I've made, ever wondered what happens to leftover wood in my workshop? Well, today I'm turning scrap pieces of walnut, paduak and wenge into something beautiful. These are all offcuts from previous projects and they were way too beautiful to throw away. I've arranged them into this brick design effect, which I wanted to put in a rough way so it doesn't have to be quite exact, and I'm prepping the mould, which I'll be then adding resin to at a later stage. Here I'm just adding wood glue and sticking down so they stay secure and don't move when I'm going to be adding the resin. Moving on swiftly to creating a mould in order to add the resin so it doesn't pour outside of these parameters. This will also stop any sort of leaks, which I'll be adding, you'll see shortly, some silicone to the back just to avoid any leaks during this project. Here I'm just using standard wood screws to add the borders around to create this mould, and now I'll just be adding some silicone just to avoid any cracks or any gaps so there's no leak during this process. So here I'll just be using my finger just to fill in those final little gaps just before we start the resin pouring process. This part of the process is really important and you should really take your time, as any leaks during a resin project can be very difficult to then correct. With this type of project, it's very hard to determine how much resin I would need. Therefore, I use what is called the rice method. I pour some rice into the gaps as you can see, and then I remove any of the excess rice. Then I plan to pour this into a larger box, which I did, and it allows me to pour back into smaller cups to then determine how much resin I will be needing. So I've made a right mess here, which will probably take me some time to clear up. However, I have now been able to determine that I need around 700 milliliters of resin for this project. Time to pour the resin. I'm using a slow cure 1:1 ratio epoxy resin for this project. Here's a satisfying part, a 45-degree mitre join. Now, I never recorded the sanding process. I went from a 80 grit all the way to 320 grit, and now I'm adding some decorative screws with the caps. I wanted to create something really different, and I'm using the wenge wood for the outside border. Now to bring out the wood grain and give it its final touch. Here I am using Odie's oil and we will be finishing this by hand, and this type of transformation always amazes me. I am able to get into the little nooks and crannies, and that's why I chose to finish by hand. And here it is, the final finish. What do you think? Would you hang this in your room? Let me know in the comments, and please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more handmade art by myself. Thanks for watching.